Businesses are budgeting for how am I going to budget to unlock new growth going into a new normal, right? That COVID-19 brought out. And it's all about making the right investments in your business so that you can to adjust to a new normal, which is all going to be in the digital space and digital world.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for in eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the never-ending relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving. Today, our guest is the amazing Natalie Louie. Here are 3 things you want to know about Natalie before we start. She was our guest on episodes 9 and 41, and she is our first three-peat guest. Awesome, Natalie. She was the head of Oracle Marketing Cloud Pricing Operations, a subscription-based business, and she was involved with the pricing aspects of maybe 40-ish acquisitions. She's seen a ton. And she's currently the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Zuora. Talk about the right company to be at. Welcome, Natalie.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, third time's the charm. I feel like these just keep getting better with you.
Well, this one will be good too, I'm sure. So you recently took a new role inside Zuora. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing, and in addition to owning some of our different product stack and personas that we go after, we're also verticalizing. And I started taking ownership of our manufacturing vertical and helping a lot of those companies on their subscription journey.
So in case everybody doesn't know, Zuora does, and I apologize for not saying this as nicely as you would, Zuora does billing for recurring revenue type companies. Was that even close?
Yes, that's a piece of what we do. You know, what we really do is we help people move from selling products to selling outcomes. So, Ford, instead of selling...
Oh, that's marketing, blah, blah.
They're selling mobility as a service, right? Is how do you turn all of your products into something as a service?
So I'm completely with you. But when I think about what Zuora is doing, Zuora is helping companies with all of the problems we've got let's talk about Ford for a second, right?
Yeah.
If in the old days, I would sell a car and I would invoice a company and they'd pay my invoice and we're all done, the transaction's over.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Nowadays, that transaction goes on forever, right? If I'm going to sell you a subscription or recurring revenue type business.
Correct.
And we've got to have a way to manage that ongoing transaction in a way that's very different than we've ever managed them before.
Yeah, and Zuora gives that software. You have a pricing catalog. So here's all the different ways you want to monetize and sell your mobility as a service. A one-time fee, recurring revenue fee. Is it monthly? Is it annual? Is it usage-based? Is it based on where you're renting the car, time of day, city, geography? Like there's so many different ways to price and package when you get into the subscription kind of economy and world, that you need software to do this because there's a lot of complexity and a lot of manual work that happens if you don't. Yeah, you can definitely do it manually, but it gets to a point where if you're growing as a business and finding success, you need software to help you.
I have a client who's been in subscriptions for a very long time. They do it manually. And because they do it manually, it limits the number of things they can do. Right. So it's just painful.
It is. If you look at the data, right, of different subscription economies, there's the subscription economy index, which is what the Subscribe Institute tracks since 2012. Any company in the subscription business is growing 6x faster than the S&P 500, so 6 times faster. And then when you allow your subscribers the flexibility to make changes to their subscriptions, they grow 3x faster. So by changing, meaning I want to pause my subscription, right? During COVID, I put my subscription to my yoga classes on pause, right? And because they allowed me to do that until I think there's a vaccine, I want to go back, they've retained me as a customer. They didn't allow me to do that. I was going to cancel my membership completely. And so I'm still engaged with them. So how do you allow your customers to pause, add more users, add more features, functionality? Like we, the customer and consumer, want to be in control. When you allow that in a subscription business, you just grow a lot faster than, traditional S&P 500 companies.
Yeah, but by the way, I believe everything you just said 100%. So companies who are doing subscription need to find a way to automate this. Don't do it manually. Completely with you. Now, the role that I really wanted to talk to you about is the fact that you're taking on the manufacturing vertical.
Yes.
That should be a ton of fun. Now, let's compare manufacturing. First off, when you say manufacturing, or when I say it, I'm going to assume we're talking about some hardware type component. So it could be a car, it could be a computer. There's something physical there. Is that a fair assumption?
Correct. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
There's something
So,
that you're selling that's tangible.
yes. Okay. So we've got a tangible item, and then you come from the SaaS world where there's nothing tangible, and we've all thought about SaaS a lot, right? Many of us have thought about it and understand it.
Mhm.
What do you think is the huge difference in a manufacturing trying to get into recurring revenue versus a software company trying to get into recurring revenue?
Yeah, I think about that all the time because there is some overlap. Right? So for companies that are in the high tech software space, you're kind of born in the recurring revenue model world. You're already thinking about annual billing, monthly billing, and payments and collection. And for hardware and manufacturers, they've never lived in that world. It was this product centric view where I have my product, I go through my distributors, my OEMs, and I sell it ultimately to my customer. It's a one-time transaction. And you could say, well, there's a lot of manufacturers that are also high tech, like the wearables, like my Fitbit. Oh, that's hardware, but then are they software? And so how we draw the lines is basically on your subscription journey. Anyone that's at the beginning, meaning I have no recurring revenue whatsoever, and I'm hardware, I put them under the hardware category because they're at the beginning. How do I even think of making the shift from cost plus pricing to value-based and usage-based pricing? What courses should I take? Right? How do I build that acumen and that intelligence and knowledge? And then for people that are born in high tech, so you could be a hardware company, but you started as a high tech company, like you're a wearable or you're a consumer medical device that was always on subscription. We put that under the high tech space. You're in that space, you already know what subscriptions are, and we're trying to grow our subscription revenue. We're trying to try different pricing. We're trying to increase our retention rate, reduce our churn. They already know what all these metrics are, like ARR, MRR, ACV, churn. You don't need to educate them on that, but they're iterating and taking things to the next level to grow versus I'm just starting. Teach me what these metrics are. Teach me what value-based pricing is. And so it's very different where they are in their journey. And that's kind of where I draw the line.
Yeah, I think the companies that you talk about with the wearables, they make a ton of sense because they already understand subscriptions. They're relatively new companies. When you think about a hardware company, even a new hardware company today, the thing, we always talk about pricing metrics. What am I going to charge for?
Yep.
And in a hardware company, the pricing metric is obviously the piece of hardware, right? If I go into McDonald's, the pricing metric is obviously a hamburger. So, so I think part of the problem is there's this item that just says, this is what you're going to charge for because this is what we make. And how do we get them off of that mentality?
Yeah, every manufacturer I speak to that's beginning, their first question is all about price points. How do you determine your price point? Because they already know what their product is. I'm selling my product. Tell me the price point. And I have to switch the conversation to say, actually, it's not about your price points. In fact, that's the last thing that you figure out when it comes to switching to a recurring revenue model. You first have to think about, what are you selling? What do they find value in? Is it, for Ford, mobility as a service? Siemens Health and Airs, it's health as a service. Caterpillar, it's dirt moved as a service. Honeywell, people aren't trying to buy electrical hardware. They want energy as a service. So what are your end consumers or buyers trying to buy? What's that service they're trying to purchase? And do they find value in it? Can they measure it? Can they articulate it? Can they control it based on their usage? That's what you want to anchor pricing around, because that's what truly brings value. And that just throws everyone for a loop, right, in manufacturing. And it's funny because if you look at high-tech companies, we debate that all the time. Every high-tech company I've been at or I've talked to, when it comes to pricing strategy, we will debate the pricing metric until we're blue in the face. How do you, and then how do you package it? So that is number one. And then picking the price point, that's easy, right? That's at the end.
Yeah. So what you just said, you just answered the question I'm about to ask, but I'm going to ask it again so that you can, so that you can talk about it even more. And that is, I've had companies come to me and say, we currently sell a product. We want to go to subscription. Do we just divide the price by 36 and make that the monthly price? And now we're selling the exact same thing as a subscription instead of selling the piece of product or the piece of hardware. So go ahead and beat that up for me.
Yes. Okay. So there's two ways to go about introducing recurring revenue that we're seeing with manufacturers. And so the one you're talking about is I want to rip and replace my existing model. My one-time transactions, I want to completely get rid of that. And that's almost a harder path. People can get there. It's a harder path because you're losing significant revenue. So let's say Caterpillar is selling those big construction cranes, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's going to disappear overnight. And what's going to happen is not only is your revenue going to disappear, but now your expenses are going to go up because you have to support a new business model. You need customer success people. You need to figure out, your pricing, your billing. You're going to be sending out more frequent bills and have a lot of different customer touch points. A lot of people go manual first and just hire more headcount, or they invest in software like Zuora to make it easy. And so we call it swallowing the whale, because I know in high tech, they call swallowing the fish, right? You're losing revenue, you have more expenses, get over the body of the fish, and then you start getting into, profitability. In manufacturing, it is a bigger swing. You got to be prepared to swallow that whale. And so absolutely, they can move in that direction. But what I'm finding is the easier way is, let me keep my one-time transactions. I don't want to disturb that. That's working. I know it's fading or disappearing. But how do I now start introducing new parallel recurring services? For instance, if I've got sensor data and I'm starting to collect how you're using it, I can potentially tell when we need to send maintenance or fix that piece of equipment that you've purchased. Hey, I've got a new service now, proactive maintenance. And my partners can go deliver that service. And so, but I'm going to use that data to spin out additional new additive services. I'm collecting, data on how you're using the product. I can give you insights, analytics that you never had before on how you're using my product. And so that's exciting to people. And I would say for manufacturers, it's almost better to start with the introduce new parallel recurring revenue services that are really sticky and get that recurring revenue machine going. And then start thinking, okay, now that people are liking these services, we've got more data, it may change how I even want to sell my product, because you're creating a direct relationship now with your customers and how they're using it. And that data and insight is huge in figuring out how you want to unlock your new recurring revenue strategy, whether you rip and replace your one-time sales or keep pushing out new services.
Yeah, I love the idea of the ancillary new services that go along with it. So I don't have to shoot my one-time sales.
No.
The other thing that can happen is if I want to try to move my one-time sales to subscription, I don't have to do it overnight.
No.
Right. I can do it slowly and say, I'm going to do 10% of my business as subscription this year and leave 90% with the big sales and the cash flow coming in. And we can get there more slowly.
And that's the way to do it, because you also have to educate your customers. And in manufacturers, they have to, educate their entire distribution channels and partners, right? It's a really big ecosystem. And just because you're ready, it doesn't mean your buyers are ready. So they have to be ready for a new model, and you have to show them, right, that you can deliver it and have those customer touch points, and they need to be delighted. And then all your distribution partners and channel ecosystem, they've got to be ready to go and deliver that as well. And so you need to make sure everyone's on board, and that just takes time.
Yeah, let me ask you, I hadn't even thought about this until you brought it up, but let's talk about the ancillary products for a second. And let's assume that those ancillary products are not physical, right? So there's no cost of goods sold. It might be data or content, something like that. Insights, absolutely.
The Caterpillar, we know how you're using our machine. We can tell you how fast and how much dirt you're moving per hour, per day. If it starts raining, how's that going to impact? And then you can build a better construction timeline.
Yep.
That's what this data is useful for.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And so one of the problems that I've seen lots of hardware companies have when they try to start charging for software. Now, forget the content piece for a second. They just try to sell software along with their hardware. They've always had this mentality of cost plus pricing. And so I've got this chunk of hardware that's got real cost of goods sold. I have this piece of software that has no cost of goods sold. So I've got a customer that's now negotiating. What am I going to do? I'm going to throw in the software because I know I can't discount the hardware too much. Do we find customers, salespeople, throwing in the recurring revenue piece because there's no real cost of goods sold there in order to get the sale of the hardware?
So I would almost flip it the other way to say, when you're starting to make this shift and this pivot, you actually sell them the recurring software and you throw in the hardware. Because this whole idea is, I want the outcome of what that hardware is supposed to do for me, right? Instead of me buying the electrical hardware, just give me the energy that I want, right? And so like with Honeywell, right, that's a business model that they're doing. And so how do I now say, okay, you just pay, and it's a win for your buyer because they don't have to outlay hundreds of thousands of dollars. Actually, just pay me this monthly fee, this annual fee. And you know what? We're going to provide you the hardware. And by the way, when that hardware breaks down, you don't have to maintain it. We'll take that burden of all of it. You don't have to own anything again. You just get the benefit of the services. And so, yes, short term, you, the company, are going to take the hit. But the idea is, if you build this long-term relationship with a lot of value and you're able to grow that customer lifetime value, in the long run, you're going to win out and you're going to have more revenue and you're going to keep growing, because next year, you already got that contract in place. You know where your revenue is coming from, right? And it's already in the books. You've got maybe a 3-year contract. You don't have to guess where the revenue is coming. And so, yes, you, the company, have to be patient for that dip. As I say, the whole swallowing the whale, but the customer, they win because I don't have to outlay 100,000. I don't have to do maintenance. I just have to get the benefit and the outcome of the services. I mean, it's a win for them.
Yeah,
So
I
would
agree
say,
completely.
take the software for free, right? And charge for the hardware, but flip it the other way, because that recurring relationship and payment for that software, that can go into pretty much infinity.
Yes. Now, what you just described is, if we're going to try to take the thing that we sell and turn that into a subscription or recurring revenue, then I agree with you 100%. If I'm going to keep selling the piece of hardware and then I want to sell ancillary services on top of that, that's where I think salespeople might have a tendency to say, I'm going to throw that in
Oh, yeah.
because I'm still trying to get my hardware sale.
Yeah. And it's good to have kind of a path forward. And so if you're just introducing those new services and you're not even sure if how you price it or package it, or if they're going to use it, yeah, give it for free, because the data you're collecting is very useful. And so while you're giving it for free, you're creating a direct relationship with your consumer for the very first time. And you can see, how are they using it? What are they doing with it? And you're collecting that data, and that's really rich. And traditionally, manufacturing companies, your channel partners own that data. And so again, there's a little tension there, right? You have to be careful of, how do I create that direct relationship with the end consumer and get that data, yet not upset my channel partners, because they traditionally hold that relationship and they monetize that. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways to manage that as well.
Yep. Cool. Probably the biggest challenge hardware companies probably have is they're going to go to a subscription or recurring revenue model is understanding, what does value mean to the customer?
Yeah.
Because they've always said to themselves, I sell this piece of hardware, but now all of a sudden they have to step back and say, what was the solution, or what were the benefits that the customer was trying to get? And how do I sell those benefits instead of selling a piece of hardware? How do you teach hardware companies how to do this?
Yeah. And so with a lot of these companies, it starts with, number one, figuring out what are the different ways that you can roll out your pricing strategy. Like, what are the different value added pricing strategies out there, right? Because they've got one trick in their playbook, cost plus pricing. So, okay, well, you can do one time, you can do annual recurring, you can do monthly recurring, you can do usage based. And when you start getting to usage based, it's this whole new world. Wouldn't it be nice to only pay for what you use? Right. And that's the whole concept around usage-based pricing. But as you start digging into usage-based pricing, there's different ways to do it, whether it's based on, time, day, tiers. The more you use, the less you pay, or maybe you want to prevent someone using your product too much. So the more they use, the more it gets more expensive. There's different ways to cut that cloth. It gets into so many different ways that I find a lot of manufacturers will have a ton of ideas. Once they start getting educated on it, they start taking classes, they start working with experts such as yourself on what is my world of possibilities. They get really excited and they go, oh my God, I have 100 different ideas. But then they get stuck in ideation phase for a year and a half. In fact, I talked to a woman before at Cisco, and when she was there, she said, a year and a half, we debated ideas, so many great ideas. And well, how do you test? How do you know which one works? Oh, we don't know. I don't know how we're going to test it. And then that's where people start failing. And so where kind of Zuora helps it in is take your best ideas. What are your 5 or 10 best ideas, or all 100? Test it. And so how do you test it? You need software. Test it. Put it in front of your customer. Are they buying it? Are they using it? Oh, they're not? Okay, that strategy's out the door. Try another one. It's all about that iteration, the agility and flexibility to iterate and test and get that feedback. Whether you're interviewing them or you're rolling it out and seeing if they're buying and clicking, that data is what's going to inform, how you're going to narrow down your choices and really find that perfect pricing strategy.
Yes. And so the problem that I'm trying to get to, and I'm hoping that you can help me with this, you said the words Ford Mobility earlier, right? Ford sells cars. And somehow they had to switch their mind from saying we sell cars to we sell mobility. I read in a book once, probably one of my favorite examples, instead of buying a refrigerator, wouldn't you like to buy access to fresh food when you want it? And so it's this mindset shift that says, yeah, it's this mindset shift that says, I used to buy a product. What I really wanted to buy is these benefits.
Yep. Yeah. And the reason why you're seeing these automotive companies make that move is because the Ubers and the Lyfts of the world know that. And they say, I don't want a car. I just want to get from point A to B. Get me there and I'll just pay for the service as I use it. And so now these big car manufacturers, and Zuora works for 8 of the top 10, automotive companies globally, is they're like, okay, if I don't make a shift, I'm going to lose out to the Lyft and the Ubers of the world. And so now how do I think about mobility as a service and sell the fact that they just want to get from one destination to another, or, while they're using that car, they want to charge it, but they don't want to have to pay for gas in the moment, right? So they can buy a subscription to an EV charging station. And every time I drive by one of these charging stations, I'll get alerted one's there. I can go use it. I don't have to pull out my credit card. I paid a subscription. You're keeping track of my usage. You bill me automatically. Hands-free, don't need my credit card. And so, these are the types of things that they're rethinking and reinventing. And then, pretty soon we're going to have self-driving cars out there. So I don't even have to drive the car. I don't have to own it. I just want the service of someone picking me up and bringing me to my next destination. How do we?
And I don't have to have a parking place.
Yeah, parking, exactly. We saw with Porsche, you don't have to pick up the car, right? Porsche subscription, they'll come drop it off to you, the Porsche that you want, when you want, and they'll take care of all the maintenance.
I'm going to spend my money and do that one day.
Then you have to.
I do. So another challenge that I see hardware companies dealing with a lot when it comes to this recurring revenue or subscriptions is I've got a real cost of goods sold. And the CFO is sitting there saying, there's no way we're selling this at below the cost of goods sold. So if we do some quick math, and I'm going to pretend that we used to sell something that's $360,000. I said it that way so I could divide that by 36 and get to $10,000 a month. And yet my cost of goods sold might be $100,000. How in the world would I take $10,000 a month for something that's going to cost me $100,000? I don't know if I'm going to get my money back. This is a big challenge that hardware companies deal with a lot in subscriptions.
They do. And even high-tech companies that were making that shift, like when Adobe made that shift from selling the, Adobe Photoshop CDs to now selling it as a service. And what those companies have to do is they have to get organization alignment and get everyone bought into the fact that you're going to take that hit and project it. And so what is that hit? How much is your revenue going to go down? If you're a public company, you've got to announce it, get the street ready, but tell everybody, look, there's a long-term path and strategy to actually grow even bigger once we get through swallowing the fish or swallowing the whale, and we get through that hump, because we're only going to grow. And look at Adobe, they're thriving, they're growing. A lot of those companies that swallowed that pill, they're now on the growth path. And with manufacturers, why I'm seeing a lot of them say, okay, let me start with ancillary services and do parallel recurring revenue streams, get 20 or 30% of my revenue in the books from these new additive services. So that'll kind of buffer the, okay, now let's maybe do a complete transition. But you've got to tell everybody, everyone has to be prepared. You can't suddenly, next year we rolled it out and then you see your profits, go down the tubes. We actually projected it. We worked with the CFO office. We're telling everybody, everyone's aware, and there's no surprises. So it's that communication piece telling people it's part of your plan, you expect it. And in fact, this is going to make sure that you're set up for longer term growth and success and to be relevant and competitive.
Nice. Natalie, I think we're going to have to start wrapping up, but I got to ask the final question. What's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Yeah, I think, especially now with year end, people are not only doing holiday shopping and budgeting what I'm going to spend for Christmas presents, but businesses are budgeting for how am I going to budget to unlock new growth going into a new normal, right? That COVID-19 brought out. And it's all about making the right investments in your business so that you can to adjust to a new normal, which is all going to be in the digital space and digital world. So how do you price for something like that?
Yeah, the world is changing. So
It is.
awesome. Natalie, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Yep, they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also on the Impact Pricing website, so they can find me there as well. So many different ways to find me.
Oh, that's right. I didn't say this. Natalie is an official SME, subject matter expert for impact pricing. She's awesome. She's brilliant. So thank you. Episode 98 is all done. Can you believe we've done 98 of these? Would you please leave us a review? This is to our listeners. Would you please leave us a review? Eloisa on Apple Podcasts said, awesome content. Looking forward for more episodes. And I am hugely appreciative to Eloisa. Thank you so much. Don't forget to join our free community at championsofvalue.com. This is where I post all of our free content. So the memes, the blogs, the videos, the podcasts, anything we publish for free shows up there. You can find that at community.championsofvalue.com. If you have any questions or comments about the podcast or about pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact